The sum of the year's digits method is another accelerated method. And to review time base, there are methods based on time. The standard time base is a straight line, an accelerated declining balance, and the sum of the year's digits, another method. And if it's based on activity, that's the units of production. There are some hybrid methods with tax reporting, and those are all the makers tables. Laws for depreciation for taxes, one of the hardest, most complex rule base. But we're focusing on financial accounting for this video. So what is the sum of the year's digits? Well, what's the logic behind it? It accomplishes the objective of accelerated depreciation in a systematic manner. You're going to multiply the total depreciable base by the declining fraction each year. The denominator remains constant in this sum of the year's digits. How do we calculate it? Same example from the other video. Cost $50,000, salvage $2,000, life and time 4 years. So how do we calculate the sum of the year's denominator? This is just to come up with a denominator. So it's a couple of steps here. The algebraic equation is n, so think n, that's your life and time, going to plug that number. So this would be, for that fraction I'm going to use with the sum of the year's digits, this is just figuring out the denominator. It's the numerator that will change. Now, there is a simplified calculation, and it's why it's called this. You just add the sum of the year's digits. So 1 year plus 2 year plus 3 plus 4, that's 10. It's just either way, whatever's easier to remember. Now what do? Well, depreciable base, you have to think about that. Cost minus salvage. 48,000. The fraction used will be in year 1, 4/10, because there are 4 years left. In year 2, 3/10. And you can see the numerator goes down. And this is the sum of the year's digits. Now, if you took 4/10 plus 3/10 plus 2/10 plus 1/10, that equals 10/10 or 1 or 100%. So, when this was originally created, it was using fractions, but the sum of the year's digits within an Excel folder or an Excel file is still going to be based on percentages, because can't you convert a fraction to a percentage? Doesn't this represent 40%, 30%, 20%, and 10%? Same thing, but it's important to learn this old method using fractions. So let's look at it year after year. The depreciation expense, and showing the balance sheet presentation. Year 2, it's declining. Notice it is an accelerated, but it's not as accelerated as the double declining balance method. Now look at this. If you watch the prior video on the declining balance, we looked at what columns stayed the same and what changed. The amount used in the calculation does not change. And what does that represent? That was your depreciable cost. Cost minus salvage. Sum of the year digits fraction gradually decreases over time. Now notice the difference with the other accelerated method, the declining balance. We'll look at comparison. With the sum of the year's digits, use a fraction. Declining balance, use a percentage. It's but what is gradually declining? Remember looking at those charts. With the declining balance, that percentage stays constant. The book value gradually decreases. With the sum of the year's digits, the fraction is what is decreasing, and the allocation base stays constant. That's the difference between these two accelerated methods, but it's not difficult to calculate once you understand what the sum of the year's digits means. Well, terminology review, service life versus legal life. You're going to depreciate over its useful service life. Allocation base, that's just a term for total depreciable cost, cost minus salvage if there is any. How much of the total cost can be depreciated? Cost minus salvage, or residual value, is your allocation base. And you get your choice of depreciation. You can use a time-based or an activity-based. Terminology, this all means the same thing. It's all a cost allocation. Plant assets are depreciated, natural resources are depleted, and intangible assets are amortized. Key to remember, this type of expensing is not a valuation. And you may like to think of it that way because you're looking at a balance sheet. You look at an asset, you look at less accumulated depreciation or depletion, and you see that what's called book value. But just because it's called book value, it's not a valuation. It's a cost allocation.